everybody! Today we have quite a boring topic for a lot of people, I believe. I made that video on how media tends to spin that everything that goes bad with games is gamer fault. And I thought, funny that word, gamer. And funny that I fully believe that they're judging like 3 billion people, which is almost half the whole population. Mainly because I don't actually know if that is the way that they imagine that word to exactly be used, as it seems that said word has quite a lot of uses, and what is and isn't a gamer entirely depends on who is interpreting the word. So if you ask me, anyone that plays video games is a gamer. But from all of the articles that I read today, it clearly isn't so. So how about we start from something easy, right? Let's start from Wikipedia. And just like the main outlines, Wikipedia tends to be quite a nice source because it's like, a community owned um, encyclopedia. Thank you, brain. We couldn't figure that word out. So it's not always gonna be like 100% accurate, but it tends to be, as a cooperation between multiple people, a fairly okay source for information, especially on something as non-important as the word gamer. So, a gamer is someone who plays interactive games, either video games, tabletop role playing games, skill based card games, or any combination thereof, and who often plays for extended periods of time. The term gamer originally meant gambler and has been in use since at least 1422, when the town laws of Walsall, England, referred to any dice player, carder, tennis player, or other unlawful gamer. However, this description has not been adopted in the United States, where it became associated with other pastimes. In the US, they made their appearance as war games. War games were originally created as a military and strategy tool. When Dungeons and Dragons was released, it was originally marketed as a war game, but later was described by its creators as a role playing game. They called their players gamers, and this is where the word changed definition from someone who gambles to someone who plays board games and or video games. So it is that association with war game that is throwing a lot of it for a loop. Then, of course, there is the issue of what should and shouldn't be included into the definition of gamer, and what do we even mean when we say that word. So, how about let's start untangling its roots from the associations of war games and the kind of ideas that media might have if they're building it from the perception of that particular wording. So here is where an old article from Polygon comes in. Where does the word gamer come from, and does it have a future? And from the outlined little paragraphs, there's a great editorial here written by games historian John Peterson about the origins of the word in early 20th century military-based board games. Peterson is the author of Playing at the World, a highly respected history of role-playing games. A game for boys, and for the more intelligent sort of girls. Peterson makes the convincing argument that gamer has always carried heavily male connotations and was seen for a long time as a word that genuinely meant man. He's not merely talking about the arrival of space invaders in the Atari 2600, he's talking about the Victorian era. He points to war games, a military strategy amusement devised by H.G. Wells and pitched as a game for boys, and for the more intelligent sort of girls who like boys' games and books. Editorials in specialist publications aimed at military board game strategists in the 1960s make reference to women having roles such as greeting gamers at the front door and serving up tea. Effectively, what they're getting at is that the word itself carries quite a lot of negative connotations, and as they're outlined at like the end of the article, Gamer as a word cannot mean something that everyone participates in, like reader, at the same time as meaning an entertainment hobbyist male dominated culture, which these articles are quite outdated. This is an article from 2014. A lot of the debating around the word would be staged at around the same time. So this is like old news. And if you look at like the search term for gamer, it starts like picking up at 1990s and then it super flatlines at like 2010s. That's when the word has kind of entered the lexicon term of just meaning anyone that in general plays and enjoys video games. So we're catching it at a time. That article is written at a time, and a lot of other articles are written at a time when the use of the term was expanding. So it didn't just mean a specific caricature of a person, it didn't just mean a man that enjoys war games. It started to mean anyone that plays games whatsoever, role playing games, video games. It started receiving talks about whether phone games count and don't count. And I don't know what your view on Candy Crush is, but I am pretty sure that later on Genshin Impact came in and took the whole industry by a storm, and suddenly mobile gaming, it's not even a question whether it's valid. It obviously has joined the ranks of whatever we might consider to be valid gaming. You don't see these kind of discussions in the 2024 anymore, as that lexicon has just nicely and smoothly progressed into the whole anyone that plays games. It's not something that we fight over anymore. It's not something that we think about anymore. It's just how the word is used anymore. And here's the thing. I think that some game journalists and some maybe TV personalities, they might not realize that when they're saying gamers did this and gamers did that, they are talking about 3 billion people. I think that they're thinking that they're talking about a very niche caricature of a person. And that is where an article by Brandon Sheffield in Opinion Let's Retire the Word Gamer on GameDeveloper.com comes in. So Brandon Sheffield states, what other media uses a single term to describe the audience? Movies use moviegoer, viewing public, or for enthusiasts, cinephiles. The printed word uses readers, or for dedicated bibliophiles. For music, you got listeners, concertgoers, audiophiles, and much more. There are levels of gradation here, allowing different descriptors for different levels of interest and dedication. The word fan applies to all media. It implies a rapid dedication to something specific. A musical artist, an author, and director. But for games, we have one word in common usage, and that is gamer. Think about what that means and how all-inclusive it is about a person's life and interests. It's simple enough word to break down. It means one who games, right? But there's nothing more to it. It defines someone who plays games to the exclusion of all else. Now, he lists quite a bit about the roots of where the word comes from. And you know what? Let's read this whole paragraph, not just like the bit that I highlighted. In the early days of games, you had the Atari 2600, the ZX Spectrum, and others of their ilk. They were all billed as cheap family computers that you could balance your checkbook on. But they also happened to play games. They were meant for everyone. TV ads showed a full, smiling family gathering around the television screen. But at some point, it became obvious that games were selling these devices. And games were for kids, it was supposed, so these home computers became kids' toys. They began to be sold like toys as well, in Toys R Us and in the kids section of department stores. When the industry famously crashed in North America in 1983, many in the news media considered the fad of games to be over. Unfortunately, that's also when most mainstream media representatives stopped paying attention, and their cursory relationship with that era represents their depth of their knowledge. For evidence of this, watch any recent news program about games. It's almost guaranteed that they will either talk about how they don't play games and hey, remember Pong? Or they will say games have come a long way since Pong. Either way, their frame of reference will be rooted in something that came out over 30 years ago. This is not only because of their own ignorance of the industry, but because of the presumed ignorance of the audience. They're guessing that their viewers haven't had to deal with the idea of video games since the 70s. After the big North American console game crash of 1983 and Nintendo's subsequent rise, you got a new group of people playing games. But popular opinion was now firmly established. These things were for kids. Then these game players grew up and they kept playing games. This was viewed as regressive. People still playing with children's toys. From here, you got games as villainous, creating a Peter Pan syndrome in our youth, or the basement dwelling man boy. The impression is that gamers are just playing with their childhood toys. In the 90s, there was a mainstream view of the older game player as a deviant. I have a friend whose mother works in film. A film associate of hers decided to make a movie based on who he thought my friend was, depicting him as a pathetic Japanophile who did nothing but play games and siphoned money off his parents. My friend is a very smart, well adjusted, and successful guy, by the way. The impression of gamer as an adult child runs deep in aging media. If you grew up playing games, it's likely your parents warned against playing games because they'll rot your brain and you'll never amount to anything. And now here you are making games for a living. But that impression of the game player as a do nothing, thoughtless drone persists to this day, and that impression is perfectly encapsulated in the word gamer. That is the word marketing people created to target and describe the basement dwelling manboy. The person who just wants to play games and cares about nothing else. That person who only exists to shriek with horror and offense on internet forums about something he or she absolutely loves. Sound familiar? Sound familiar in how that word is used in the media? I think you got the idea of where media's idea of what a gamer is correct, honestly. And this is once again an old article. Like, all of this debate happened like 10 years ago. And yet we have embraced this word with open arms and proudly displayed on our Twitter tags. Remember when Twitter was a thing? Microsoft even has its gamer points. Who are we really? A gamer, if we follow the rules of English, should be a person who plays games to the exclusion of all else. If you use a word that fully defines you, leaving no room for extra interests or hobbies, what does it say about you? It immediately becomes something to defend or qualify. You can say, I'm a gamer, but I also read books. That's a bit forced, and doesn't it sound strange? Why the need to define oneself by one's hobby anyway? In what context could one naturally use the word except derisively? And the news media does exactly that. Gamers are lined up to get their hands on the new Call of Duty video game. Interviews with overexcited youths with faraway stares ensue, encouraging every mother watching to say, I'm glad that's not my baby out there. The word gamer is regressive. It accepts the portrait of us painted by the mainstream news media, and every time I hear it or read it, it actually makes me feel a little sick. I believe in this art form, and I believe in the people who make it. That's why I am so hard on this industry because I believe that as great as it sometimes is, it can get better. So play games, of course, but don't let the playing of games define you. Why would you ever really need to describe yourself as someone who plays games anyway? Do you walk up to people and say, yeah, I watch movies? Well, of course you do. Everyone watches movies. If games are to become part of culture, shouldn't it be assumed that you play games? Shouldn't it be presumed that we all do? in first world nations isn't the person who doesn't play games in a greater minority when you factor in Facebook Angry Birds and the like. The folks who play these more casual games don't consider themselves gamers because they don't think of playing games as a thing that defines them. They're just casually consuming entertainment. And frankly, they're right. They see gamer as a term that describes someone else. They just happen to play games. It doesn't define them. And in their way, they're being more progressive than we are as a result. If you want to call yourself a gamer, fine. I can't tell you what to do. But if you want to start changing the public perception of the game playing public so that the definition includes everyone who plays games, I say it's time to retire the word gamer. There are a lot of very similar notions. Like, there was an opinion piece by Anthony, which is why I hate the word gamer. Now, I have my Chrome in dark mode, hence why any kind of thing that I read sometimes can screw up and all of everything can go everywhere, but it really helps me reduce the quantity of migraines that I get, so I prefer my stuff dark, in case you haven't noticed. Yet, despite the massive popularity of the medium, the perception of gaming has not changed in over 3 decades. To me, gaming is still perceived as an activity for geeky nerds that live in their mom's basement, have no life outside of their virtual fantasy charades, and are incapable of functioning in society. Nobody likes to be stereotyped. That is a stereotype of what a gamer is. Over the years, I've noticed a strange phenomenon that's prevalent in the gaming community. Some people don't like to admit that they're a gamer. These are people that I've seen play games for over 10 hours a week, yet they refuse to associate themselves with that label. My mom is the absolute worst offender of this. I watched her play hours and hours of Words with Friends and Candy Crush Saga on her phone, but the minute I directly point out that she's playing video games, she'll retort with, "This isn't a video game. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a gamer." A group of my friends also fell victim in the same kind of logic. Despite playing Mario Party for hours at college, it seems that the more popular a game is, the more likely it is to be associated with people that deny that they're gamers. Yet the dictionary definition of a gamer is simply one who plays games. So they're all technically gamers. What's going on there? Well, these people think that they're above the stereotype of the label. They're living proof that majority of people do not fall into pathetic stereotypes, yet they continue to claim that they're not gamers. As much as I wish that people would admit their hobby, I can't blame them. In fact, I don't want to be identified with these stereotypes as well, so I refuse to call myself a gamer too. I am so not like the other girls. Sorry, I didn't mean to be offensive to this person. It's just, it's something that reminds me of. I had the pleasure of interviewing one of my good friends, 22-year-old Jose Bass, about video games for a news writing class a couple of years ago. When I started to ask him about his gaming habits, he told me that he was afraid of liking video games too much. As I got older, I started to realize that people didn't care about video games as much as I did. It turned out my devotion for games wasn't deemed normal by society, but was normal for a typical gamer, he said. I am constantly judged, especially by my grandfather. I try to avoid playing games when he is around. Now, he does state that majority of these people like grow out of shame, and he quotes a tweet. If you're afraid to play video game in public, you should be more afraid that you're probably gonna die without anyone loving you for exactly who you are. I love that tweet so much because nobody should feel bad about who they truly are. The fact that people are afraid to play games in public because of general perception makes me hate the word gamer more than anything else. This is the debates happening once again 10 years ago. Fast forward from like 2014 when that was a popular topic to 2021, which is how I now use said word and how the word is very widespread in being used. Is the term gamer now so broad as to have no meaning from marketers? By Luke Aldridge. What does it even mean to be a gamer when there's supposedly 2 billion of them worldwide? Well, 3 billion now, Luke. As part of our deep dive into all things gaming, Luke Aldridge of Dentsu's gaming division DG Game argues that D Game rather argues that the industry needs to reach some kind of consensus on the term. When reports claim that there are close to 40 million people in UK who play video games and more than 2 billion who play globally, it has little strategic marketing value lumping them all together in a single group. These numbers encompass very different types of people, compromising different subcategories or tribes with their own microcultures. Over time, as more and more people grew up playing games and perhaps more importantly became less likely to grow out of playing video games, continuing instead to game into their 30s and 40s, it was perhaps inevitable that meaning of the word gamer would need a rethink. You have no idea how common it is for me to now like be playing an MMO and somebody be like, "Got to go, my baby's crying," or got to switch off the chat playing with my child for a little bit so that, they don't accidentally see inappropriate chatter. You have a lot of parents that play games, you have grandparents that play games, you have teenagers that play games, and you have young adults that play games. Describing someone as such doesn't make a lot of sense if it can be applied to most of the world's online population. You wouldn't call people that use the internet browsers. You can have more fun with this line of logic. People who watch Twitch, their full context in 2021 around those who play games is vital. It's necessary to read the methodology to understand who is included in that number. It might be someone who plays online games at least once a week, once a month, or even once in the last 12 months. Those of us who fall into the first definition might have trouble calling those in the last gamers. I would actually argue that people that play a game once in the last 12 months and only that much are probably not a very common category in general, unless like you get constricted into the army or have to have very serious surgeries. A lot of people will find time for their hobbies weekly or at least monthly. Sometimes they will go for like 6 to 9 months not engaging in their hobby because either their work went into overdrive or they're having exams or something like that. But it's rather not common for there to be a person that goes, "Yes, it's the New Year's Day. I get to get my one day of gaming in." And then let me wait for the next New Year's Day. Most people are playing at least something more frequently than that. We seem to be moving further away from the consensus around what it means to be a gamer rather than towards one. But rather than pontificate, it is time to stand and be counted. So here's my definition of a gamer. A gamer is someone who considers playing video games their main passion, pastime, or profession. So effectively, to sum the whole video up for you, we went from gamer means gambler in 1400s to gamer means an enjoyer of board like war games, like board games that are war games, something that Americans were doing during the Victorian age, apparently, and it became kind of synonymous with man and, kind of thing that a man would have in his man cave. I imagine like golf clubs, and next to it, you have like a board game with warships on it or something like that. Sorry, I'm 30 years of age. I feel like I am too young to be drawing a caricature of the Victorians in my head. Therefore, when I try to do that, it comes out all wrong. That might just be my lack of education in history talking. I was plenty of educated in history, but I didn't take it as like a major, so I haven't really revisited it outside of like people that are passionate about history on YouTube's for a very long time now. Let's put it that way. So working off that, we then progress into Dungeons and Dragons that first kind of advertises itself as a war game and then expands into role playing game, and then to electronic media that really skyrockets that word's usage as it just shoots through the roof at around 1990s. But the regular old media news channels only cover it up until like the 1983 big Nintendo crash thingy majigga. Wow, I literally read this information and I already can't recount it quite well enough. So that crash happened, and that is practically where they left off. They just kind of take themselves out of reporting on games, and this becomes like this little insular thing that the media over here doesn't really hear or talk about. They still talk about mainstream movies and books, presumably, but not video games. Therefore, their understanding of what it means to play video games becomes very stagnated. Then the association of games as a pastime for kids comes in, and when games prove to become a bit more than just a pastime for kids, the regular perception is look at those sad men that haven't grown up in order to, quit playing video games. And it's more targeted towards men because we still have the association running all the way from war games. Now, that is not covering the inner turmoil of how women enter games media. I feel like by this point we don't need to cover it. I believe that there's quite a few women enjoying games media these days. It's not a one woman in 10 now, it's not 10%, it's a large amount. But once again, we have progressed to this group being 3 billion people, where marketing people are now kind of worried that the term is meaningless because it doesn't actually describe to you what person you're advertising to. And that's the way that I see the term. I see the term as synonymous with book reader or movie watcher. I don't agree with some people that say that in order to apply said term, this has to be your only passion. I believe that it would be actually quite hard to find a person who only focuses and has one hobby and one hobby in particular. If you like sewing, you might like knitting, you might like nature photography. If you like gaming, you might also like painting and going for hikes. I know a very sporty person that plays games. I know a nurse that plays games and is also kind of a workaholic. So this is how she spends her free time for the most part, but she really loves her profession. And a lot of what she talks about is what she does at work. The kind of person that's gonna be playing games, even games as a profession, as in they're a famous YouTuber, they likely disconnect and do something besides games. I think having just one hobby would drive plenty of people nuts over time, honestly. I do photography, I go for walks, I paint pictures, let's say, I write books. I completely entirely forgot that I wrote like 5 or 6 books. Wow, thanks, brain. I have programming knowledge. I haven't like taken that out for a while. I read books as a thing that I enjoy doing. I watch videos and movies with my friends and series sometimes. it's part of being a person. They are correct that a lot of people will be engaging with this media backwards and forwards, but I would say that even the people for whom this media somehow encapsulates their livelihood are likely also engaging in other medias. It would be hard to find a person that doesn't hasn't read books or doesn't currently read books or listen to books. It would be hard to find a person that doesn't watch movies. People aren't a one trick pony. Now, do I believe that the word needs to be retired? No. I think that the word has sorted itself out. As in, it encapsulates a very large percent of people right now and doesn't mean much. The thing that I do believe that kind of needs to be sorted out is media's want for shit talking people in general, I guess. Because this doesn't just expand to games. Any broad term that you can use, they like making rage baity content. Millennials come to mind. Everything's Gen Z's fault as well now. But any broad, big word that they can use, they will, and they're gonna weaponize it and they're gonna shit talk it. And yeah, a lot of them probably lack the understanding as to what the word means in the current day. I think that the article from 10 years ago that believes that the old media is still stuck in the old understanding is quite correct. Because when you read even gaming news populations, they go, all of them gamers, they all are the worst people ever, they're all so wrong. I don't think that they mean 3 billion people. If they did, I don't think that they would be speaking the way that they do. They tend to have a broad, like a small little caricature of what a gamer is. And a man child in a man cave is probably correct, which is quite interesting considering that a lot of these people believe that gaming as a hobby should be more inclusive. And what they fail to notice is that it is. There's a lot of people that play games now, and when they start using the word gamer in a very um, tiny way rather than a broad way, they're the ones excluding everything that actually fits into this category these days. It's not it's no longer an internet debate as to what the word is. It's just a broad usage word. I don't know why I found this topic quite fascinating. I suppose it kind of gave me a bit of context about what journalists might be talking about when they mention the word gamer. I think that that's a bit of what I wanted, hence why I wanted to make this video. I hope that it was interesting. If you have any opinions about it, please tell me in the comment section down below. My videos actually receive a nice amount of comments. Thank you. A lot of videos on YouTube have stopped receiving that kind of engagement, and oftentimes you sit there, you rant at the camera, and you're like, okay, and now I'm gonna have a discussion and I will be able to talk with people about this thing that I got fascinated about and talked about for quite a bit. And then you get crickets. And sometimes you even get like views and likes, and you still get crickets in the comment section. And that doesn't feel very good because the creator, I don't think that they want to be talking to themselves. If I really wanted to talk to myself, I think I would make a blog and I would switch off the ability to comment. Or I would switch off the ability to comment on my channel, which obviously I haven't done. I don't want to be talking to myself. I would greatly love to hear your opinion on this word, on what it encapsulates, on what it should encapsulate, on what it shouldn't encapsulate, and what do you, in general, what you think about the journey that the word has taken. Anyway, thank you for watching and thank you for listening to me ramble, especially if you listened for this long. I hope I'm gonna see you in my other videos. If you want to know what kind of other videos I make, please just like peruse my channel, and then if you like, I would appreciate if you subscribed. I don't know what I'm gonna be at when this video goes up, but in last year, according to YouTube algorithms, I went up by 1,000 subscribers. I would love to reach 10,000 subscribers. It doesn't give me anything, but that is a very nice round number, isn't it? It's like it's a pretty one, isn't it? So it would make Mirta very happy. And also, really thank you for my Patreon subscribers that support these kind of rants. Without you, I wouldn't have as many things to rant about and normally end up spending that money on buying new indie game releases unless an emergency happens. But in general, I'm a poor person and I don't have a lot of money. So, every bit helps, and you are really awesome for that. So, thank you for watching. I hope I'm gonna see you in my other videos. Bye, B.